Tee it up.
I was thinking about this earlier today.
See what I did there?
There's
Tee it up.
there's a lot of post spring content quarterback rankings that are bad. I saw some running or wide receiver rankings today that were less bad. But guess who was overrated? Texas. Imagine that. But anyway, not what you learned out of the SEC this spring, but has anything happened that has changed the way you think about the league, its standing, the pecking order, whatever, now going into this season? Has anything happened this spring that has changed the way you look at the league going into this season?
I know it sounds like I'm cheating off of your paper. I get that. I read the question, and then I didn't read the rest of what you put in there immediately, and then I looked. I was like, oh, maybe it's his idea. The one thing that stands out to me more than anything else, and there is a very real possibility that I, and maybe you guys and everybody else is proven completely wrong on this. The lack of an emergence of a quarterback that Nick Saban felt comfortable with in spring at Alabama changes the way I look at Alabama a little bit. Now, the last time they had a quarterback, like a big-time quarterback competition that went to the season where Nick Saban was hush-hush about it at media days and, just kind of said all the things, we were later introduced to Jalen Hurts. And I know they've had competition since then. Cooper Bateman and whoever else was in that group where they never really figured it out that year. And that team won a title, didn't it? Yeah. The 2015 team at Alabama won a title, which is crazy to think about. But neither Ty Simpson nor Jalen Milroe did anything. And they bring in Tyler Buckner, who was okay at Notre Dame. And I know that he dealt with some injuries. But maybe Tyler Buckner elevates his game because of who is around him at Alabama. It's altogether possible. But don't try and sell me today on Tyler Buckner as an elite quarterback simply because he was the best available quarterback in the portal coming out of spring. That's what it was, right? Alabama went and got the best available quarterback in the portal coming out of spring because they did not believe in what they had. We've seen that before. We've seen a coach realize in a game setting that what he has next is not good enough to win games, and so he goes out and gets a quarterback. But not when there's such a limited time frame and a limited availability of quarterbacks. What I'm referring to is Hugh Freeze. When Ole Miss played that game at Arkansas without Bo Wallace, or Bo Wallace got hurt, and it was Ryan Buchanan and Devontae Kincaid? And they watched that, Hugh Freeze and his staff watched that thing unfold, and they're like, we got to have a quarterback for next year. And they went and got Chad Kelly.
And then tried to pretend that there was a competition. There was not.
Stop it. I mean, yeah, whatever.
There was not.
And it worked out quite nicely, thank you very much. Maybe this turns out to be the exact same thing for Alabama. But Alabama took Tyler Buckner because he was the best available quarterback at the time, and they needed to go get a quarterback. There were no other options. Malik Murphy from Texas didn't jump into the transfer portal. KJ Jefferson from Arkansas didn't jump into the transfer portal. Spencer Sanders or Jackson Dart or whatever didn't jump.
Drake May
didn't jump into the transfer portal. So, here we are. And so that makes me think about Alabama a little bit differently. And oh, by the way, they also don't have Jahmyr Gibbs. And they also had another half dozen players who were drafted. I mean, I tend to think they're going to figure it out running back. And I think they'll be okay on the offensive line. And I think their defense is going to be okay. But, oh, by the way, they've also got a new offensive coordinator and a new defensive coordinator. This is a year where it feels a little bit different to me at Alabama, but the quarterback thing is what it kind of pushed it over the edge for me.
So it didn't change it for me because I told you a couple months back that I think I'm going to predict LSU to win the West, and now you're maybe more confident in that pick. But the thing I'm interested in, and I brought it up a couple of times here, is how different Alabama is than Georgia on this. Alabama has two, a 4-star and a 5-star high school quarterback that they recruited, and they don't believe they've developed to the point that they can just hand the offense over to them. Whereas at Georgia, they're going to go with one of their guys. They aren't looking in the transfer portal. They've got a 4-star, 5-star kid, Carson Beck over there. He's going to be the guy. And if he's not, it's going to be another one of their 4-star, 5-star guys. Brock, I think it's Vandergriff is his name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Carson Beck. Yeah.
Who my guess is, if he could enter the portal and go to an SEC school, would be at Auburn or Alabama or Florida tomorrow and be their starter. So I think it's interesting to see that Georgia has sort of overtaken Alabama in terms of the place where, talk about development, that Alabama doesn't feel like they've done a good enough job. And maybe that's on Bill O'Brien, who's an NFL guy, and, maybe development wasn't really his thing. But it's interesting to me that Georgia is willing to just hand the reins over to their next guy, and Alabama feels like they had to go outside the family.
Borky, what do you make of this message? He will either be Joe Burrow or just okay.
He doesn't have Joe Burrow's ability. He's played too much. Nobody got to see Joe Burrow until he got to LSU. We've seen Buckner. We know what
Burrow
he can do.
Burrow was also average his first year.
Yeah, but remember, he joined the team with 2 weeks before the season began.
I remember having that take and getting ridden off this show.
No,
not by us.
You were still holding
by
on
that
to
guy
that
in the
take.
Middle.
You were still holding on to that take as he was walking off the stage with the Heisman Trophy.
No, I wasn't. That was all preseason 2019, where I was like, he hasn't done anything that good, and you were killing me for it.
Was it?
Yes.
Yeah. Hey,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
He got better at the end of that season. Like, you saw growth toward the end of the year. The first 6 games of that year
played worse competition. Go look at the schedule.
I mean, look, hey, Dad, I'm not going to apologize for being right, man. I was on the Joe Burrow
You just said I was right.
Before you were. Way before
you
were.
The words came out of your mouth. Your mouth is where they came out of.
The most prolific quarterbacking season in the history of college football belonged to Joe Burrow, and I kind of told you it was coming, and all you wanted to do was argue with me.
Oh, my gosh.
Right? You want to hear more? Brian Haydad's says, I knew Joe was going to be special his first year at LSU when he changed the play at the line and they scored a touchdown. Dwayne, why did that make you know that he was going to be special?
I mean, people do that all the time.
And I'm not being critical when I say that, but that's kind of one of the responsibilities of a quarterback. You got a play call that is not going to work against a given defense. You check to a play that you think will work, and then you execute it. Maybe it's the recognition. I don't know the specific play you're talking about, so that's fair. We got another message. Don't count Bama out yet. Georgia just won 2 natties with a JUCO transfer from Ellisville. That's Brian in Laurel.
We need to talk about that first line, though. Don't count Bama out yet. Who's counting them out? Calling somebody vulnerable does not mean that they're still not, among the best. It's weird. RG3. Okay, this is how ridiculous college football media is. The ACC network quoted and made a graphic out of this RG3 thing, where he says, Clemson will actually shock the nation and be in the run for a national championship. The program that has won double-digit games for 12 consecutive seasons is going to shock the world by being good again? Same thing with this. Hey, Alabama looks vulnerable here, like they did a year ago. Remember how many one-score games that they won and also lost? They look vulnerable again. Oh, don't count out Alabama. We're not. We're just saying that they don't look like they are invincible the way they have
won
recently.
2 national championships since 2016.
Yes.
Is it shocking the world?
I mean, come on, RG3, and he gets paid probably more than 3 of us combined, which is just depressing when you've got takes like that. But nobody's counting out Alabama. Georgia fans are mad at Barrett Sallee today because in his overreactions, post-spring overreactions column, where he applies something, a worst-case scenario to every team in the SEC, he said Georgia's not going to win the East. That's not what he thinks is going to happen. That's a worst-case scenario kind of deal. His for Ole Miss, for example, was the quarterback situation is going to cause internal strife on the team, and you'll know by September when they underachieve. That's not what he actually thinks is going to happen. It's just, hey, worst case scenario, that's what's going to happen. Georgia fans are like, oh, you disrespect us. Everybody's disrespecting us. Give me a break.
He really didn't have much of an overreaction for State.
No, he's complimentary of Mississippi State.
It was defense will be the identity of the Bulldogs. Why is that an overreaction? Your head coach was the defensive coordinator last year.
He's sick of State fans.
That just feels like a reaction.
He's sick of State fans attacking him all the time. He wanted to throw a bone, pun kind of intended.
Well, now I'm going to attack him because where's my overreaction? Everybody else got one.
But the point is, the SEC West, if you're looking at the West objectively, feels wide open. Now, yes, Alabama and then LSU's rosters are better than the rest of the SEC West. Of course it is. But when you look at Alabama, as Richard laid out earlier, they look vulnerable. That was a team that was vulnerable a year ago. Needed heroics to beat Texas A&M. Ole Miss had to throw to the end zone to beat them in Oxford. Needed a last-second field goal to beat not a good Texas team. And they lost 2 games. That team lost the Heisman Trophy winner and the best defensive player in the game. Also, they're running back and a handful of other guys. LSU, despite winning the West a year ago and having a roster that people seem to really like, they lost some pieces offensively. That was a good team, a very good team, not a great one a year ago. Arkansas, if he stays healthy, has a really high-level quarterback. Really high-level quarterbacks can win games in the SEC. Texas A&M has the best roster that money can buy until they all transfer out.
Oh, don't say that.
Oh, I forgot, yeah. But A&M's got a roster filled with talent. Talent wins football games. Mississippi State has a front six that's the most underrated in the SEC in a veteran quarterback. Ole Miss has an offense with personnel that can score with anybody. Now, the other side of the ball is still a massive question mark, but you get my point. All on down the list, everybody in the West has something that's going for them that's, hey, on a given day, they can beat anybody. And on a given day, they can lose to anybody. Alabama's going to have a better season than Ole Miss and Mississippi State, more likely than not. But if you're telling me that there's no shot that they could lose to either one of those teams, I think you're crazy.
Brian says counting Alabama out means they will be out of the top 5. Somebody says, remember Saban won a championship with Jake Coker at quarterback and won the SEC with Blake Sims. Yeah, he did.
Well,
the SEC was...
they played Missouri in the SEC championship game. There wasn't another team like Georgia in the conference.